Hey Raiders, Jacko here with another Raid Shadow Legends video. Today I wanted to take us all the way back to the beginning and talk about the 4 starting champions and which one of those I think would be best suited for you if you're just starting or if you wanted to start again, say if you're in the first week or so of your campaign. So remember, if you like the content, please like, subscribe, and toll that bell. It really helps me out quite a bit. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into those champions. So, as we're going through these, and as I go through the arms and armor portion of these guides, I wanted to try out a new rating system. Essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to rate their armor, their weapons, their overall badassitude, and their overall aesthetic on a scale of 1 to 5 gourds. Now these will be the little flaming jack-o'-lanterns that I have as my logo. We're also going to put in a very special one that is a smashed gourd for those characters that just totally fail at one of those categories. So, without further ado, let's start with my least favorite of the 4 starting heroes, and that's going to be Elhain. Now, let me preface this by saying that all 4 of the starting characters are very good characters, and they all will work at the very least as your primary campaign farmer. So the character you're going to use when you're leveling up your food champion so that you can get people up to 6 stars. All of them will work for that. However, some of them have a little bit more versatility outside of that than the others. Elaine here, for example, has a little bit of versatility in the arena and to some extent the dungeons as well. So let's go ahead and go over her kit here. So on her A1, we've got Keen Shot. Attacks one enemy, places an extra hit if this attack is critical. Since you're likely going to be building your heroes to have a 100% crit rate, you can pretty much see this as having 2 attacks, which is good for things like Fire Knights, but it's not exceptional. On her A2, attacks one enemy, then all enemies. Has an extra 15% chance of inflicting a critical hit, and places a 30% increased crit rate buff on this champion for 3 turns if the target is killed. So, as a campaign farmer for this second half that places a 30% increased crit rate buff on this champion for 3 turns if the target is killed, that's not going to be a huge boon for you as you're going to be moving rounds rather quickly. That 30% crit rate isn't going to do anything. And since you're probably building to near 100% crit rate anyways, it's just excess. However, the attack one enemy and then all enemies, that is a really solid AoE. It does a good amount of damage. Definitely worth utilizing, and it's on a 4-turn cooldown, which is a little long. In all honesty, most of the starting heroes have a good AoE on a 3-turn cooldown. And then Valley of Death. This one is on a 3-turn cooldown and really is her bread and butter attack. Attacks all enemies 2 times. That's it, nothing special there, but a nice hard-hitting AoE. She is the sort of champion that you might want to consider putting in a stun set when you get to the point where you can start farming stun sets. Her stats are really typical for the starting heroes. A little bit more HP than some of the others, but otherwise good all around for a rare champion. I mean, a little low when you're looking at the epics and legendaries, of course. So, how about her aesthetic? So, let's start with the armor first. She is definitely in a suit of armor that is tailored for an archer. This is high mobility, no heavy pieces. She does have this nice scale mail drape, as well as portions of her chest covering. Scale mail is actually a remarkably good protection from a lot of different attacks, be they piercing, slashing, a little bit less on the bludgeoning attacks, but still. Overall, I would have to say that this armor is pretty nice. The vambrace, on this left hand holding the bow isn't great. It comes a little bit too far over the point of the hand there, which would make mobility of that hand pretty tough. On regards to her pauldrons, actually really good. They're not going to get in her way. The hard pauldron is on that forward arm, the one she's going to be exposing the most during a combat. So that's good. So, overall, armor, I'm going to give her a 4 gourd armor. In regards to her weapon, the bow is very pretty. In all honesty, there's nothing that's going to necessarily get in the way, though she is holding the arrow in the horribly wrong point, but that's negligible. If she holds the arrow correctly, the bow is going to be solid. It's going to be a nice recurved bow, offer a lot of power. So I'm actually going to give her weapons a 5 gourd. Her overall badassitude, she strikes me as someone who would definitely be a threat on the battlefield. Someone who I would take note of as someone to get around the melee people and kill as quickly as possible. So, in order of badassitude, I'm going to give her a 4 gourd as well. So overall, for Elaine, I'm going to give her a 4 gourd. I think she's a really solidly designed champion. Her armor and kit are good for what she is. If she was ever in a melee, she would die in nothing flat. But as an archer, she shouldn't be in a melee, and therefore her kit is great. Next up, we have my starting champion, sadly to say, who is my 3rd least favorite now that I've gotten into the game a little bit. Not Sandlashed Survivor, but rather Galek. Now, Galek is a solid champion, as I said, for all of them, and he has helped me get all the way up to Dragons 13, Dragons 14 as my AoE nuker. That being said, I'm at the point in the game where I'm actually looking to try and replace him with another AoE nuker. He's just kind of fallen off in my progression. That being said, he does get me a solid 30-second campaign farm on Brutal 12-3, so he is a solid champion. And if you get him into God tier gear, he can be a very solid AoE nuker, even at endgame. That being said, most of us here on this channel don't have endgame gear. So, starting out is A1, we've got Core Slash, attacks 1 enemy 2 times. Good, solid, helps with Fire Knight, things like that, but really, again, nothing special. A2 is Hellraiser, and this is his bread and butter AoE attack. Attacks all enemies, has a 15% chance of inflicting a critical hit, places a 30% increased speed buff on this champion for 2 turns. Now, this hits tremendously hard. It's one of the highest AoE multipliers in the rare champions category. Generally, it will wipe out the group you're going against in 1 hit, especially if you have a defense down champion. The places a 30% increased buff on this champion for 2 turns. That's nice in dungeons and things where you're not worried about your speed tuning as much. However, when you're talking about clan boss and things like that, where your speed tuning needs to be precise, this really throws a wrench in the works. So, pros and cons, but very hard hitting. Then on his A3, attacks 4 times at random, has a 30% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns, has a 30% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns if the target has more than 2 debuffs. Sadly, this is not reliable as your decreased defense. For one, it's not AoE, which means that frequently you're not going to be hitting everybody, and since it's got different chances, or well, the same chance of placing the light version of decreased defense or the heavy version of decreased defense, it's really not consistent, and that consistency is something you really want for your decreased defense debuffer. That being said, it's nice to have it a little bit of in there just in case your main decreased defense debuffer doesn't land on everybody. So, still solid, hits decently nicely, but nowhere near as hard as Hellraiser. Finally, we've got his aura. Increases ally HP in all battles by 15%. This is going to be the same aura of all 4 of these champions. When we look at his stats, honestly, a little bit more defense than Elaine, lower attack, lower HP. His stats are pretty bad, even for a rare champion, so he's a little bit harder to build because of that. Still, solid campaign farmer. As I said, he gives me a 30-second campaign farm on 12-3 Brutal. And he's still in my setup for pretty much all of my content, but I am looking to phase him out already, so take that as you will. Armor-wise, we can start off with these boots here. Good knee protection. One of the first champions in our guides here that has had knee protection. And that's crucial. Knees are a hard point. They're easy to get rid of in a combat. So you want them heavily protected. Toes, again, nice defense there. And the little section there that comes up is not going to get in the way of his ankles as he moves. Very solid there. He's got a good hip and waist drape here, covering the vital organs. It's not going to be easy to get to his femoral artery to get him to bleed out and nothing flat. He's got some nice protection on the hips, which are painful points to take a blow in. Going up a little bit farther, and we've got some pretty decent van braces. Again, we've got some trouble with them coming out a little bit too far. Now, his appear to be articulated there, which is going to give him more motion in the wrist. But he's still going to find himself catching on his own van braces regularly if he moves his wrists a lot. And those two spikes, those are going to gouge the back of his hand constantly. Get up to the chest armor, which he has none of. Okay, so he's a pad boy. That's going to be painful for him in the long run, especially against bladed weapons. But I fight without a chest armor when I'm doing the SCA heavy combat, so I can't give him too much shit about that, in all honesty. Finally, we've got this pauldron. If it was scaled down maybe 40%, so it actually hugged his shoulder, it would be just fine. The spikes might get a little bit frustrating and painful if he's really a contortionist while dodging. But as it is now, he's going to run his head into those pauldrons all the time, whether he's dodging a blow that's aimed at his head or whether he is trying to attack with that right-handed axe. So, all in all, for the armor, I'm going to give a Glek 3 gourds. Primarily because of that shoulder piece. That's just not going to be useful for him. In terms of his weapons, he's got 2 nice hand axes here. They've got a good hook so that you can hook a shield and pull it out of your way. Make it easier to land a blow with the other side. Has a nice spike on the back, so if you want to switch it around. Even has a little bit of a stop or maybe a butt spike on the back end in case you get really close and can't get the head around for a good shot. So all in all, on the weapons, I'm going to go ahead and give Glek here a 5 gourd. I'm very impressed with his hand axes. Badassitude. This guy is going to scare the crap out of you on the other side of the field. The fact that he's not wearing armor means that he's either very good or very tough to kill. Either way, he is going to be very intimidating. So, and because I'm a little bit partial to orcs, I'm going to give Glek here a 5 gourd on Badassitude. So all in all, just like Elaine, for his entire aesthetic, weapons, armor, and Badassitude, I am giving Glek a 4 gourd. Shall we move on? Next up, we have a nice, I believe she's in Sacred Order. Yes, there she is, Aethel. Aethel is probably my second favorite, looking back on usefulness in the game. I think because of one of her abilities that we'll get to in a minute, she is not much faster, a little bit faster in campaign farming than either Elhain or Glek. And I think because of the self-buff she gives herself, and the fact that it gives an extra turn, she is going to be more viable for the other areas of the campaign. Essentially, you're not going to replace her as quickly as you are the other two. So, let's go into her kit. On her A1, she's got Strike Down, attacks one enemy 3 times, and has a 75 chance, 100% chance when booked, of placing a 25% weaken debuff for 2 turns on the last hit. That's really solid. It's great for Fire Knight. It's good for Clan Boss because you're getting that weaken in there. So, maybe not the most reliable of weakens since it's only a, well, I don't know, it's a 100% chance on that last hit. It's a very reliable weaken, and it's on her A1, which means she'll keep it up pretty much continuously. Very solid A1, best I've seen so far of the starting champions. Divine Blades, attacks all enemies, has an extra 15% chance of inflicting a critical hit. This is a solid, heavy-hitting AoE attack. It's going to be your main damage dealer when you're going through campaign and things like that. It's on a 3-turn cooldown, like most of the, all of the starting champions AoE's 3-turn cooldown. She has a bonus though, and that comes in her A3. Higher Blessings. Places a weak version, 25%, increase attack buff on this champion for 2 turns, and places a weak version, 30%, increase defense debuff on this champion for 2 turns if this champion's current HP is less than 50%. Gains an extra turn. Now, that's the big one. So she's always going to be putting that increased attack on herself. She may frequently be putting that increased defense, especially when she needs it, when she's hurting. But that gains an extra turn. That's always going to happen, which means she's always going to be able to move from higher blessings into one of her other abilities. That extra turn is also going to help reduce the cooldown of Divine Blades. So let's say you start a fight, you start with Divine Blades. Next turn, you do higher blessing, you're right back into doing Divine Blades again. It's wonderful. That extra turn is perfect. Now, I know on her AI, she starts with higher blessings, then goes into Divine Blades, which means she'll have 1 attack with Strike Down before she's right back into Divine Blades. This higher blessing is really useful, and that's why I think she's a little bit better than Galek and Elhain when it comes to her sustainability, her ability to continue through the campaign for longer. Again, she's got the 15% HP in all battles, like all the other starting champions. Really solid. Well, aesthetically, starting with her armor, she's got no shin or foot protection. Greaves are a really important part of combat if people are allowed to hit you below the knees. The reason is the front of the shin has a ton of nerve endings, and getting hit in the front of the shin hard, even though it won't break the bone, you will feel like that bone is broken. It's a debilitating strike. That's why Greaves across the front of the shins are really useful. So that's not a good thing. However, she has beautifully constructed knee armor, very protective. She has upper thigh armor, which is going to be wonderfully protective as well. And she couples it with nice hip armor. So the lower half of her body is actually very well protected, minus the Greaves. Very solid in that regard. I'm very happy with that. Looking at her vambraces and gauntlets, she's actually got half gauntlets. That's going to be a problem given that she's wielding a spear. We'll get to that when we get to the weapon. No, let's get to it now. So, when you're wielding a spear or another great weapon, frequently you'll block with the haft, and if it's a bladed weapon you're going against, that will slide down and hit your hands. That's why you wear full gauntlets. Something that protects all of the hand, including the fingers, so you don't lose fingers when that happens. She doesn't have this. She's got a half gauntlet. Half gauntlets only cover the back of the hand, really. They leave the fingers and all open, and they are much more useful when you're fighting with something like a sword or something with a full guard around the hand. We call those a basket hilt. That way, you're still fully protected, your fingers aren't risk, but you have more mobility in the fingers and everything than a gauntlet would give you. So, she's not fighting with a basket hilt on either of her weapons, including the sword behind the shield there. So, she's going to lose fingers when it comes right down to it. However, unlike many of her predecessors, she does have elbow armor. This is good for the same reasons that knee armor is good. It's going to protect a vitally crucial point on your body. And then, as we've going to find over and over and over, these pauldrons are ridiculous. For one, they're so far out that they're not actually protecting the point of the shoulder or really any of her shoulder. A blow down is going to still land without any protection from her armor. That's a bad thing. That point of the shoulder hurts like the dickens to get hit. They're also large enough that they're just gonna get in her way. Though, to be fair, they are far enough down that she might not hit herself in the face with them when she moves. That's a big might. If she does any of the over-the-head attacks or anything like that, she's probably still going to smack herself in the face. Finally, she has no helm. This is dangerous. Just flat dangerous. Your head's your most valuable point. If you're going to be in melee, you want it protected. Period. End of discussion. And similar to that, she's got a bit of a gorget here that's protecting the back of her head, and that is metal, so it's protecting the back of the neck, which is vital, but it is not protecting this front throat portion of her neck. That's a really important place to protect, as you can get your trachea and everything crushed with a good blow. It's a quick way to die. So, had this come all the way around, good gorget. All in all, because we're kind of pushing the pauldron issues down, I'm going to give Aethel a 4 gourd on her armor. On her weapons, she's got a nice heater shield, which she is actually holding well. It'll cover a good portion of her. Though given the rest of her kit, she's probably going to be holding that over her head a lot. Very pretty, too. I mean, very well done. Her markings or everything are on there. And she's got the extra sword there. A little bit long for an easy draw, but if she loses the spear, which it will be very likely considering she's using it one-handed, she has a backup weapon. All in all, good. I like it. The spear is a pretty spear. It looks pretty light, so she might be able to use it one-handed decently. She can also use her shield to hold the spear up so that she can thrust with it without too much trouble. So, it's a very Spartan, Greekish idea of using the spear. It's probably only about 6 feet tall, given the length of it compared to her, so she shouldn't have too much trouble wielding it. It's got a nice crossguard here. That's to keep your enemies or monsters or whatever you're fighting from continuing down it after you've skewered them to get in range. You find this very commonly on boar spears, as boars are wild, angry critters that are going to slam into you and push that spear through them to get at you. So, very common there. She also has a butt spike on it, which, if she can manage to use that with using the shield in the other hand, or she loses the shield in the other hand, will be very useful when people get close. So, when it comes to the weapons, I'm actually going to give Aethel a 5 gourd. These guys are doing pretty good for the first batch, I've got to say. Overall badassitude, I'm actually going to go a little bit low on Aethel and only give her a 3 gourd on badassitude because, yes, she's got nice protection everywhere, but the head is the primary place to hit, and it's the easiest place to hit, in all honesty. So, she's not going to scare me on the field. Not even a little bit. As soon as I get inside that spear range, she's dead. Pure and simple. So, overall, on Aethel, again, as weird as it's been, I'm going to give Aethel's overall look a 4 gourd. Now let's look at the last one, and realistically, for all content, the best of the starting champions. And that's going to be our good friend, Kael the Dark Elf. Now, Kael has the most versatile kit when it comes to the starting champions. And what I mean by that is he's going to be the most consistent for you as you go throughout the game in all different aspects, be it clan boss, be it dungeons, be it the campaign farming, even into Doom Tower now and everything. He's going to be your go-to. And if I was going to restart my account, I would go with Kael, just because he is that versatile. You can build him the way you would for your campaign farmer with some extra defense, and then use him everywhere. He would long outlast any of the other 3 as your account progresses and as you get into the mid-end to end game. So let's take a look at his kit. First off, we've got Dark Bolt on his A1. Attacks 1 enemy, has an 80% chance, 100 when booked, of placing the weak version, a 2.5%, poison debuff for 2 turns. Great A1. Poison is perfect for clan boss, dragons, pretty much any of the bosses, honestly, that aren't immune to it. On his A2, Acid Raid. Attacks all enemies, has a 15% chance of inflicting a critical hit, just like the AoEs on the other starting champions, and fills the turn meter of this champion by 25% for each enemy killed. Because this is a hard-hitting AoE, you're going to find that this is frequently going to fill his turn meter almost to completely full, and he's going to go again immediately. Great AoE. Best of the 3. Or the 4. Best of the 4. And then on his A3, attacks 4 enemies at random, has a 40% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. That gives up to 50%, and since it's 4 times, you're looking at probably 2 debuffs out of the 4. This is why he is so good in all the content. That heavy poison debuffs, pretty much constantly, is going to do way more damage on the clan boss, on Dragon, in the other dungeons than the other starting heroes. Now, because he only has a 1 attacker on his A1, he's not as good as the others when it comes to Fire Knight. However, that's the only place I would see him as equal to or a little bit less useful than the other 4 starting champions. So, what about his kit? Kale here is a caster who's actually decently well armored, in all honesty. He's got good boots and greaves that are articulated enough that he's not going to be tripping himself or restricting his movement. He's got a little bit of knee armor here, though there's a little bit of a gap there. Still, he's got knee armor, it's protection. He's even protecting his upper thighs. Very nice. He falls down a little bit in the groin and hip area. That's going to hurt, and it's going to make it easy to catch a femoral artery or something like that. Kill him quickly if you can get a blade in there. His chest armor looks to be leather with some metal boning, essentially. And that's going to be very flexible, allow him a lot of freedom of movement. Even this central chest piece, which is protecting essentially his sternum and a little bit out from there, isn't going to get in his way. It's going to be nice protection. All in all, good chest armor. His gauntlets are beautiful, honestly. If you notice that the backhand piece of the gauntlet actually goes above the vambrace, that gives you a lot of motion in that wrist. He's got articulated fingers, which is going to be very nice, especially since he's holding a staff. He's likely not going to lose fingers in a combat if he gets into melee. The point of his vambrace covers the elbow. You see this a lot, and it's okay. It's not ideal, in all honesty, but it does offer a little bit of protection. Even his pauldrons, the spikes on the pauldron are facing out, so he's not going to stab himself in the head when he moves. The shoulder pieces are just on his shoulders, very nicely fitted so that they're not up and away. He's going to have very nice freedom of motion. And this upper arm armor that's attached to it is nicely articulated. It's going to allow full motion of the arms. Frankly, these are the best pauldrons I've seen on any of our starting champions. Now, no gorget, no helm. So he's pretty much asking to die if he ever gets into melee. But he's a caster, so we're going to allow it on him. All in all, for his armor, I'm going to actually give Kale here a 5 gourd, my first one yet. In terms of its weapon, it's a basic caster staff. I imagine he's not going to be actually trying to hit people with it. At least I hope not. Though he could use it as a bit of a bludgeoning weapon. It's not sharpened. It's not going to give you a nice axe effect or a polearm effect or anything like that. But it could still be used as a quarterstaff. His hands are protected so that he could actually, take a blow on it and protect himself well. So, for Kale, because it's not designed for combat, I'm only going to give his weapons a 4 gourd. Overall badassitude, I'm not very afraid of mages. I know I should be. It's a dumb thing in my mind, but the guys in heavy armor with scary looking weapons terrify me more than the caster. Still, bad way of thinking about it. So, badassitude, I am going to give Kale a 3 gourds. For me personally. If I was thinking overall, probably a 4 gourd. So let's call it a 3.5 gourd on that. And, as with all the other starting champions, we're going to give Kale an overall 4 gourd on his weapons, armor, and overall aesthetic. So, that's going to be our top 4, our top 4, our only 4 starting champions. And when it comes down to it, if I was to re-choose or restart my account, I would definitely go Kale. He's got the most sustainability, the most ability to level up and progress into the end game of Raid Shadow Legends. After that, my next choice would be Aethel because of the self buff and the quick cycling of her big AoE. Elhain and Galek have their place, but they're definitely tied for my 3rd place award on them, on the starting champions. So, as always, thank you for joining. If you like the content, please like, subscribe, and toll that bell. And I hope to see you next time. Have a great day.